Lena was 26 years old, selling handmade scarves out of a folding table on the corner of Rue Saint-Denis, and she had not eaten since the morning before. That was the kind of life it was. Some days the money came, some days it did not. But Lena never complained about it out loud, because Mama Celeste had not raised her to complain. She had raised her to keep moving. The morning everything changed started the same way most mornings did. Lena packed her scarves into the big canvas bag her mother had sewn for her years ago, kissed Mama Celeste on the cheek while the older woman was still pulling her housecoat closed, and walked the 40 minutes to her corner. Because the bus fare was $3 she did not have. It was October, and Montreal was doing what Montreal does in October. The wind had teeth. The sky could not decide between gray and darker gray. Lena set up her table, arranged her scarves in the way that showed the colors best, and waited. By 10 o'clock she had made one sale. A woman in a hurry barely looked at her, pressed a 20 into her hand, and jogged away before Lena could even say thank you. That 20 was her rent installment for the week. She folded it carefully and tucked it into the inside pocket of her coat where she would not accidentally spend it. She was rearranging the display for the 4th time when she noticed the woman. The woman was standing near the bus shelter about half a block away. She was old, maybe 70, maybe more. Her coat was thin for the weather, not a fashion choice. The kind of thin that meant it was all she had. She was holding the side of the shelter with both hands, and from where Lena stood, something looked wrong. The way she was leaning, the way her head was tilted. Lena watched for a moment. People walked past the woman without slowing down. A man in a wool coat glanced at her and kept going. A teenager looked up from his phone for half a second, then looked back down. Then the woman's knees buckled. She caught herself on the shelter post, but just barely. Her whole body swayed. Lena left her table. She did not think about it. She did not look back at the scarves she had spent 3 hours arranging. She just walked fast toward the woman, and when she got close enough, she put her hands out and said, Hey, I have you, I have you." The woman looked at her. Her eyes were confused but not frightened. She was breathing hard. "Are you hurt?" Lena asked. "I do not think so," the woman said. Her voice was quiet, French accent underneath the English. "Can you stand?" "I was standing," the woman said, almost with dignity. "And then I was not." Lena almost smiled. "Okay, let me help you sit." She guided the woman down onto the bench inside the shelter. The woman's hands were shaking. Lena crouched down in front of her and looked at her face properly. She was pale, and her lips had a color to them that was not good. "When did you last eat something?" Lena asked. The woman was quiet for a moment. "Yesterday, in the morning." Lena felt something move through her chest. She stood up, looked at her table still sitting unattended, half a block away, and made a calculation. The scarves could be stolen. There was nothing she could do about that right now. She went into the dépanneur behind them and spent $7 on a bottle of orange juice and a packaged sandwich. $7 she had not planned to spend. She carried them back to the shelter and held them out. The woman looked at them and then looked at Lena. "I cannot take this from you. You are not taking it. I am giving it." Lena sat down beside her. "Please eat." The woman's name was Marguerite. She told Lena this after she had finished half the sandwich and most of the juice, when some color had begun to return to her face. "I am Lena." "Lena," Marguerite repeated, as if she was making a note of it. They sat together while the wind moved around the outside of the shelter. Lena learned small things. Marguerite lived in a rooming house nearby. She had been in Montreal for many years, before that St. Lucia, before that a life Lena could only guess at. She had no family in the city. She had a neighbor who sometimes checked on her and sometimes did not. "Is there somewhere you need to be?" Lena asked. "Someone I can call?" Marguerite shook her head. "No, I am fine now, thank you." She made a movement as if to stand. "Wait a moment," Lena said. "Wait until you are sure." They waited. 15 minutes, maybe 20. Then Lena walked Marguerite the 2 blocks to her rooming house, which was on a street Lena knew but had never had reason to turn down. The building was old and the hallway smelled like radiator heat and old carpet. The woman at the front desk barely looked up when they came in. At the door of Marguerite's room, the old woman turned around. "You left your table," she said. "I know. Your things might be gone. I know that too." Marguerite looked at her for a long moment. You did not have to do this. I know, Lena said again. Then she smiled. Feel better, Marguerite. She walked back to her corner. The table was still there. The scarves were still there. Not a single one had been touched. Lena stood in front of them and breathed out for the first time in an hour. She made 2 more sales that afternoon, enough for groceries and a bit more for the bus fare she hadn't had that morning. She packed up at 5, walked home through the cold, and did not mention Marguerite to Mama Celeste because there was nothing particular to mention. It had simply been a morning. A woman had needed help. Lena had helped her. That was all, except that it was not all. 3 weeks passed. November arrived and the weather became serious about itself. Lena's table moved inside to the weekend market at the community center, which cost $12 for the table fee, but at least she wasn't freezing. She had added 2 new scarf designs, and one of them was selling well. Life had its rhythms. She and Mama Celeste ate dinner together every evening, and watched television after, and did not need to say much because they had been together long enough that silence between them was comfortable. Then one Saturday, Lena was packing up after the market, and she looked up and Marguerite was standing in the doorway. Except it was not the Marguerite she remembered. The woman in the doorway was wearing a long camel coat, the kind that had been expensive when it was bought and had stayed expensive. Her hair was neat. She stood with a straightness in her back that Lena had not seen on the woman in the bus shelter. The confusion that had been in her eyes that October morning was gone. In its place was something very calm and very clear. Lena straightened up. Marguerite saw her and walked across the room. Several people looked up as she passed. You remember me, Marguerite said. Of course I do, Lena said. Marguerite looked at the table, at the scarves, at the canvas bag Lena was packing them into. She looked at Lena for a moment without speaking. Can I take you for coffee? She said. They went to the cafe down the street. Marguerite ordered for both of them without asking, which was the kind of thing that could be annoying or could be the manner of someone accustomed to handling things, and in this case, it was the latter. When the coffees came, Marguerite wrapped both hands around her cup and looked across the table. I want to explain something to you, she said. Lena waited. Marguerite was quiet for a moment, then she said, I was not homeless. Lena kept her expression still. I was not the woman you thought I was on that street. Marguerite set down her cup. I have worked for 30 years in community development, grants, housing initiatives, support organizations across Quebec. For the past decade, I have run a foundation. She named the foundation. Lena had heard of it. Most people in the city had heard of it. For the last 4 years, Marguerite continued, I have done something each autumn. I spend 1 week in a neighborhood. I dress plainly. I take nothing with me. I want to understand what it feels like to need something from a stranger. She paused. I want to know what is still there, in people. Lena looked at her. The collapsing, real, Marguerite said. My blood pressure has been something I manage. That morning I had not been careful enough with it. What happened at the shelter was not part of what I was doing. That was genuinely what it looked like. You were actually unwell. I was. And you were still the one who stopped. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Lena looked down at her coffee. She thought about the $7. She thought about the table she had left unattended and the scarves she had been afraid would be gone when she came back. I did not do it for a reason, Lena said. I know, Marguerite said. That is the thing, Lena. I have done this 4 times. I have met many people. Some are kind because they think someone is watching. Some are kind because they think it might come back to them. And some people, she stopped. Some people are kind because that is simply what they are. You did not know me. You had nothing to gain. You had things to lose. And you still stopped. Lena felt something in her throat she did not want to show. I watched you that day for longer than you knew, Marguerite said. After I was inside. My neighbor at the rooming house, I had asked her to watch, to let me know how things went. She told me you walked back to your table alone. She told me you stood there for a minute before you packed up. Marguerite's voice was even. I thought about you for 3 weeks. What is it you want to tell me? Lena said. Marguerite folded her hands on the table. I want to offer you something, not charity. She said the word clearly, the way someone says a word they have thought about. What I saw that morning was not someone who needed saving. It was someone who was already doing what she was supposed to do, and doing it without enough space to do it properly. She looked at Lena. My foundation has a program. We fund small makers and craftspeople, people building something real. We provide a working grant, access to workshop space and mentorship from people in the industry. The application process is competitive. We fund 8 people a year. Lena said nothing. I would like to nominate you, Marguerite said. The cafe was warm and smelled like coffee, and the radiator ticked in the corner, and outside the window people walked past with their shoulders up against the November cold, and Lena sat very still. I have to be honest with you, Lena said finally. I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything today. I am not a business. I am a person with a table. That is how most real things start, Marguerite said. Lena looked down again. She thought about Mama Celeste, who had been on her feet since before Lena was born, who sewed until her eyes hurt, because there was always something that needed doing, who had sacrificed things Lena probably did not know the half of, so that Lena could keep going to school, keep trying, keep believing that the table on the corner of Rue Saint-Denis was a beginning and not an ending. Can I think about it? Lena said. Of course. And can I ask you something? Marguerite nodded. The other 3 years, the other people you met, what happened to them? Marguerite was quiet for a moment. One of them runs a food access organization now that serves 400 families a month. One completed her degree and is working in public health. One opened a small restaurant that is still open. She paused. One declined the offer. She said she did not feel she had earned it. Marguerite looked at Lena. She was wrong about that, but I respected her answer. Lena thought about that on the walk home. She thought about it through dinner. She and Mama Celeste ate chicken and rice, and the news was on in the background. And Mama Celeste talked about the woman down the hall, whose son had finally come to visit, and Lena nodded, and answered in the right places, but her mind was somewhere else. After dinner, while Mama Celeste was washing dishes and Lena was drying, she said, Mama, can I tell you something? Mama Celeste turned off the water. She could always hear it in Lena's voice when it was something real. Lena told her everything. Mama Celeste listened without interrupting. She stood with the dish towel in her hands, and her face was careful and still. When Lena finished, they were both quiet for a moment. The woman who collapsed, Mama Celeste said. Yes, you told me about her. Lena frowned. I didn't think I had. You did not use many words, Mama Celeste said. But you mentioned it. You said there was a woman at the shelter and you helped her. She folded the dish towel precisely. I remember thinking that was exactly like you. Lena looked at her mother's face. What are you thinking? Lena said. Mama Celeste set the towel down on the counter. I am thinking that you should not let someone else's fear live in your chest. She looked at her daughter. You are asking me if it is too much, if it is too good, if you should be suspicious. She shook her head. That is not the question. The question is whether you want it. I want it, Lena said. The words came out simply, because they were simple. Then take it, Mama Celeste said. She picked up the dish towel again and went back to the pot she had been scrubbing. Lena stood next to her and dried the next thing she was handed, and neither of them needed to say anything else. The application process took 2 months. Lena gathered her portfolio, which meant photographing every design she had made in the last 3 years, and arranging them in a way that told a story rather than just a catalogue. She wrote a statement about her work that took 11 drafts to get right. Marguerite had given her the name of someone at the foundation to contact, and that person was patient and straightforward and answered Lena's emails usually within the same day. In January, she received a letter. She was sitting at the kitchen table when it came through on her phone, forwarded from the foundation's email. She read it once, then she read it again. Then she put her phone face down on the table and sat with her hands in her lap for a full minute. Mama Celeste was in the other room. Lena could hear her moving around. Mama, come here. Mama Celeste appeared in the doorway. She looked at Lena's face and stopped walking. What happened? Lena picked up her phone and held it out. Mama Celeste read the letter. She read it slowly, the way she read everything. Then she lowered the phone and looked at her daughter, and her eyes were bright and full. "Lena, I know. Baby, I know, Mama." Mama Celeste sat down at the table. She put both hands flat on the surface and looked at them for a moment, and then she looked up. "All those years," she said, not sadly. "Just the way you say the truth when it finally comes to rest somewhere." Lena reached across the table and covered her mother's hands with her own. The grant was substantial. Enough to stop paying the table fee at the community center. Enough to rent a small, proper studio space on a street near Rosemont. Enough to buy the equipment she had been pricing for 3 years and never been close to affording. The foundation also paired her with a woman named Tanya, who had been running a textile business for 15 years and who had very little patience for hesitation and a great deal of patience for questions. The studio was small, which Lena did not mind. It smelled like wood and dust and something metallic when she first opened the door, and she stood in it for a long time before she moved anything in. She had a window that looked onto a brick wall, which was fine. She had a work table and good light and enough quiet to think. She called Marguerite, because it felt important to call rather than email. "I wanted to thank you," Lena said. "You earned it," Marguerite said. Lena had the feeling she said this to people often, and meant it every time. "Can I ask you something?" "You may." On that morning, at the bus shelter, before the dizziness. "Were you cold?" A pause. Then Marguerite's voice came back and there was something in it. "Yes," she said. "I was very cold." "I thought so," Lena said. "I could see it." Another pause. "That coat I was wearing," Marguerite said. "I have given it away since then. I did not want it in my closet anymore." Lena understood that without needing to understand it completely. By spring, the studio had a shape to it. Lena was working with natural dye methods she had been researching for 2 years, plant-based, slow, the kind of process that could not be rushed. She was developing a small collection. Tanya had connected her with 2 boutiques who were interested in seeing it when it was ready. Mama Celeste came to see the studio on a Thursday afternoon in April. She walked in slowly and looked at everything, the rack of half-finished pieces, the jars of dye compound lined up by color, the sketchbook open on the work table. She picked up one of the scarves. It was deep rust and forest green, the 2 colors bleeding into each other the way they do in October when the trees are at their best. "You made this," Mama Celeste said, "last week." Mama Celeste held it for a long time. Then she looked up. Her eyes were the same as they had been in January at the kitchen table, bright and full. "I used to watch you when you were little," she said. "You were always making things out of whatever was there." She folded the scarf carefully. "I was always proud of you. But sometimes proud is not the same as knowing." "Knowing what?" Mama Celeste looked at her daughter. "Knowing that it was going to be all right," she said. "That it was really going to be all right." Lena did not say anything. She walked over and put her arms around her mother, and Mama Celeste held on, and outside the window, the April light was doing what April light does in Montreal, tentative and then suddenly sure of itself, and in the small studio on the street near Rosemont, something that had been a long time building finally felt like it had arrived. That October, almost exactly 1 year after the morning on Rue Saint-Denis, Lena set up a proper booth at a crafts fair in the plateau. Not a folding table on a corner, a real booth, with her name on the sign, with the collection she had spent 9 months making. The first person to stop was a woman in a yellow raincoat who asked a lot of questions and bought 2 scarves. The second was a man who held one up to the light for a long time before putting it back, and then changed his mind and came back for it 10 minutes later. By noon, the booth was steady. In the afternoon, Marguerite came by. She stood at the edge of the booth and looked at everything. She did not say anything at first. She picked up one of the smaller pieces, a pale indigo with an edge of amber, and turned it over in her hands. "This is something," she said. "It is just a scarf," Lena said. Marguerite looked at her. "No," she said simply, "it is not." She bought 3 and paid without asking the price first. When she was leaving, she turned back once. "How is your mother?" she asked. Lena smiled. "She is well, she's here somewhere." She went to look at the other booths. Marguerite nodded. Something crossed her face that was not quite a smile and not quite something else. "Good," she said. "Good." She walked away through the fair, her camel coat moving through the crowd, and Lena watched her go and then turned back to her booth and the next person who was stopping to look. The rest of the afternoon went the same way. One person and then another. Questions. Conversations, the occasional person who just stood and looked for a while, and that was all right too. Lena was not in a hurry anymore. She had learned that the good things did not always announce themselves. Sometimes they came quietly, the way that October morning had come, cold and ordinary, and full of something she had not been able to see yet. She had stopped for an old woman at a bus shelter. She had spent $7 she did not have, and left her table unattended, and walked 2 blocks she had not planned to walk. She had done it because that was what the moment asked of her, and she had said yes, and from that one yes. In ways she could not have mapped and would not have believed, everything else had followed.